Hello, hello, hello. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Kimberly Guile. I am on the board of directors for our Mars Hill Speech and Debate Club and the head of our debate coaching. I am very excited about our upcoming tournament and very excited about having you come and join us to help judge our kids in their debate rounds. If you are judging speech, we do have a separate video for speech, which we're also very excited about. This one will be specifically focused on debate. I wanted to start a little bit on just high level and talk first about why we debate, why we believe and are so passionate about our students debating in high school and what that means. And I wanted to read you a quote from my son, actually, who has debated for several years, as we talked about it this week. And as I was preparing for this video, he said this: "If you can only convince those you already agree with, you will never be able to change those who matter most." And I really feel that that is the crux of what we do here. You're going to come into this debate and you're going to hear things from two sides of an argument. You're going to hear things that you may agree with on one side and not agree with on another side. The purpose of debate is that a student or any of us can go in, have empathy for the other side, and be able to defend arguments that we may not see as what we personally agree with, but we are able to reach out and to understand. And this happens on any side of an argument, whether it's a political, ideological, religious, all of those things. When we come and we just say, "Hey, you're wrong," we block that person and we're unable to reach them. As you know, we are a Christian homeschool debate league, and our mission is that our students learn to speak boldly for Christ. For them to be able to do that, they need to be able to reach people. And that is what debate does. It builds empathy for somebody you may not agree with, but if you can get underneath the reasons for why they believe the way they believe, then you have a chance of reaching that person. So just that's an overall start, so you understand our passion behind this sport and why we think it is such an essential thing, not just for our students, but for the world today, and to be able to learn to argue and have discourse without anger, which we see so much in the politics today. So I'm going to start by giving you a few basic principles of debate. This will apply to all of our debate types, which we'll go into a little bit more in detail. So what you can expect from this is we're going to talk about what does a good argument look like, what does a clash mean, and how you will understand how debaters are responding to that clash, and then how you judge a clash. Your job as you come into this is very, very important. We ask and we train our judges to come in as what we call an unbiased judge. This is a little bit more difficult than it sounds, but it's important to understand what your role is in the judge. Your role as an unbiased judge is to come in without preconceived opinions. You are going to hear resolutions that you may firmly agree with one side the minute that you hear it. That is not your job to say what side you agree with. And some of these debates formats that we have, the students don't know what side they're going to be on. So they're required, as we talked about, to build arguments for the side that they're assigned. When they do that, again, going back to my preamble on this, it gives them empathy and strength for what's on the other side. Your job as an unbiased judge is who best defended their side, not the side that you agree with, but who best defended their side. And I'll explain a little bit more how to do that as we look at the clash of argumentations. So we'll talk about clashes. And then what we're going to do is we're going to go into each type of debate. We have three types of debate. We have team policy, Lincoln Douglas, and parliamentary. And I'll get into those in some slides and teach you a little bit more about those. So as you come in and you've gone till today, you know what type of debate you'll be judging. So the first thing that we're going to talk about is what is an argument? And we teach our kids this funny acronym, which you will probably never forget either. And it's sexy. And what that means is every argument should be well built and beautiful. And it really stands for four things. You will always hear a statement. That statement could be, let's just give an example, elephants are pink, right? And then they're going to give an explanation next. In their words, what does it mean that elephants are pink? And then they're going to give an example, and that, depending on the type of debate, could be a specific evidence example, it could be an analogy, it could be a story, anything that helps you understand their explanation and then further illustrate that. And then the last thing in the sexy framework is the impact. Why does it matter? Every good argument should have those four parts. So when you're listening to an argument, and you'll see, we'll talk a little bit about how to write down the arguments as you go through. Typically, you'll write down the statement, and then you'll write things that were impactful under that statement. And if you understand the format that the student is presenting the information to you, somewhere in there, and sometimes they mix these up depending on the expertise of the debater, but there will always be an explanation, there should always be an example, and there should always be an impact. So that's your first line of judging, the best built arguments. Then your second line of judging is what we call a clash. Now I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this so we can understand it. That's when two arguments come up against each other. So I'm going to give you a real example of an argument that's happening in political debate today. And this is as far as immigration. And so there's an argument for pro immigration is that having more immigrants fills critical labor shortages. So that would be the statement. And I won't go through all the explanation and example, but a debater would come up and they would say, hey, immigration provides helps with critical labor shortages. And they would explain, that happens in farms and some of these different industries that helps. They'd give you an example and they tell you why it matters. Now, the clash comes when the responding team stands up and responds to that argument. This is very important to understand. What you're looking for in a clash is a response to the actual argument, not a distraction. For you to be able to judge on that clash, you need those two parts. And I'm going to give you a poor response example, and then I'm going to give you a good response example. So a poor response example to this argument would be, well, that may be true, but criminals come across the border. So I want you to think about what just happened. One team got up and said, hey, we fill critical labor shortages. The other team got up and said, hey, but criminals come across the border. That does not disprove the first argument. It is actually a new argument. So when you're going through your flow, you would say, they said this, but there was not a response. That is actually a new argument. And so then that new argument does not respond to this one. The argument that's not refuted continues to stand through the round until it's refuted. Now, a good response to that argument would be, so the initial argument, just to remind you, is that immigrants fill critical labor shortages. Now, a good response could be, yes, but they only fill critical labor shortages for specific industries, and they put undue burden on our housing and our public systems and so on and so forth. And this is why it matters. Now you have a clash. So when you have the clash, then what you're doing is you're looking at the two arguments and you're going to say, who best supported their argument? Who convinced me on each side? Now, not what you believe is right? Because on this side of the debate, we have to go in with, we don't have a dog in the fight, but who best supported their argument. And that will also help you with as you're writing down arguments to understand that. What is an actual response to an argument? And then what is a deflection of the argument? The reason that I spend a little bit more time on this is a lot of times we, and myself included, we go in and we will just agree with one of the statements. But that's not debate. We are not there. Debaters are not there to throw out enough statements to see which ones we agree with. They are there to bring arguments, refute those arguments, and then decide who best defends the arguments that are carried out throughout the round. You will get some documentation at the end of this for each type of the debate, and you will see that also documented in there, that our job is to come in and judge on the arguments within the round, not on our own expertise. Now, many of you coming in have a lot of business experience and life experience, and many of you are engineers and have been teachers and have a wealth of experience. As we come into the round, it is not our job to bring our specific expertise. We come in as a well-educated adult. And it's very, very important that we are not adding arguments to the round that we think were missed or that we think would have been a better argument, and then judging on those. Now, it is great at the end of the round when you're giving feedback to the debaters on your form, if you want to add on additional information for the debaters, such as, hey, I am an expert in this field, and this is something else you could have discussed. It wasn't a wait in the round because neither side brought it up, but if you had, it would have helped you. That's also very helpful for the debaters. Okay, now we are going to dive into our three types of debate. I am going to start with the first type, which is team policy. Team policy is are the one that we usually start our debaters on when they first start. The reason is that there's two people on each side, and it's very evidence strong, which means that a newer debater can rely on evidence more than explanation and impacts, because as you learn to build arguments, that can be difficult for new debaters. The second type of debate we're going to be talking about is what we call Lincoln Douglas. This type of debate was based on the debate between Lincoln and Douglas over slavery, and this is what we call a values debate. What is the value that ought to be, as opposed to what we are actually doing? Now, this debate is a little bit more advanced. They will have one resolution which will go through, and the sides will alternate. So they have to argue both sides of the debate, and both sides of the resolution. So that goes back to what we talked about before. The students have to be able to learn to defend two sides of an argument to be able to understand it. The third type of debate is what we call our parliamentary debate. This is our most advanced form of debate. And in this debate, the students are given a resolution 20 minutes ahead of time. They're assigned a side, and then they must come in and debate each side of that resolution. Now, this is the one where you will hear all kinds of resolutions. You may hear, UBI, which is universal basic income. You may hear things about economics. You may hear things about, you may hear things about politics. This one is very important as you come in, that you have set aside, as we talked about, your own personal opinions about the debate and who best defended the arguments. It's also my most favorite debate because sometimes you get some fun resolutions. And the other part is it does allow for audience interaction and judge interaction. So throughout the debate round, people are allowed to say "hear, hear" or knock on the table if they agree. Okay, so with that, let's jump into our first type of debate of team policy. Okay, team policy. Team policy debate, as we discussed before, is the debate over whether or not we should implement a policy in the United States federal government. As a general rule, this is thought to be something that would go before Congress, you, the judge, being as Congress making a decision if we should pass this policy or not pass this policy. I'm going to go through the slides. And what I'll do is I'm going to spend a little bit more time on the team policy slides, because there are some duplicates in the other types of debate. Uh, so, so that on the next ones, if you are judging a Lincoln Douglas or a parliamentary, please just watch this part so that you understand, when you get this deck, and these slides in your email, that you understand what each of them mean. We are STOA. Us personally, we are Mars Hill, which is a club within STOA. STOA is a national debate league. We are homeschooled students. Ages that we'll be debating for you will be between the ages of 12 and 18. And we host over 100 tournaments each year. We've seen incredible growth in the speech and debate, into the speech and debate group, which we are very excited about, as the sport within homeschool continues to grow. Thank you again. We can't do this without you. We understand that the time investment it is taking you, and we want you to know the incredible difference that you make, for these kids, bringing your expertise into these rounds to help judge these kids and give them this real world experience that prepares them for the next steps in their life. Now, all of that I talked about before may have seemed a little scary. I just want to go back and just reiterate, there's only a few things that you need coming into this, and you are qualified. You are qualified. You are coming in that unbiased manner. You are listening for arguments. You're listening for clashes, and you're making a decision. You have the life experience and the knowledge to be able to do this. I know the first time that I judged, it was very scary. I didn't know how to flow. I didn't understand what some of the kids were saying, and it was scary. Understand, it's up to the kids I said kids, students. They're not kids. Students to help you understand what they're saying. When the debate gets over technical and you don't understand, that doesn't work for their side. So that's very important, is you have what you need. And they will also, at the beginning of the debate, in all types of debate, will ask you for what they call judging philosophy. Really, all that means is, hey, I've never judged a debate before. Here's what I need to be able to do. I need to be able to write down your arguments. So if you could, and we use the word tag, if you could make sure to tag your arguments or tell me, go slow enough so I know what's important to you. And that could be as simple as your judging philosophy. A lot of times they'll want to know, do you know, are you an engineer or a teacher? Because they'll really try to tailor their communication so that you best enjoy the round. And that is actually all part of the experience of debate too, and one of the incredible growth opportunities for these students. What to expect. So what you'll be one judge in preliminary rounds. Now, what that means is that we have 6 rounds in each type of the debate that we call preliminary. The students that do the top best in those preliminary will proceed to what we call out rounds. Now, in out rounds, we will have multiple judges. Sometimes we have 3, 5, and then in finals, anywhere between 7 to 9. Once you judge your first round, you may be interested in judging more or participating in those. It is a little bit addicting, and we would love to have you as much as we can if this is something that you enjoy. Okay. Uh, what is debate? Now, we talked a little bit about this. This is 2 opposing teams arguing an idea. Underneath that idea, which we call the resolution. Now, in all the debates, we're going to have a resolution that will drive the debate. Remember, team policy, it's a policy resolution. In Lincoln Douglas, it's a value resolution. And then in parliamentary, wild card. It could be any of the above. It could be a policy. It could be, depending on how the team frames the round, they could get up and they say, we think this is a fact, or we think this is a value, and we think this is a policy. So, that also could be a point of contention within the debate in parliamentary only. Now, you will always have an affirmative side and a negative side. The affirmative side has to prove the resolution true. The negative side has to disprove the resolution true. Debaters will rotate throughout the tournament on affirmative and on negative. Now, team policy is a little bit different in that the debaters get to choose which policy they're going to pass. So we have a very general resolution. The United States federal government should substantially reform its policy toward one or more countries in Central and South America. So you will have teams come in and they will debate tariffs. They'll debate immigration. They'll debate, trying to think of more examples. Humanitarian aid. So those are all things that they'll pick. They'll come in with what they call their mandate. Under this resolution, we are going to implement more aid, or we are going to abolish tariffs. That will be the mandate. You want to make sure that you flow that and get it down. And then once they tell you their mandate, they're going to give you their argumentation, which then flows through to the refutations of the other team. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. This is the structure. You'll get this in your email, but it tells you the time for each speech. Debaters are required to time themselves. And so they will have a timer up there. You will hear the end of the time beep. Now, team policy does have what we call cross-examination. So after the constructive speeches, you will see right here, there is a time of cross-examination where 2 of the team members will stand up and the opposing team gets to ask the other team member questions. Now, I do want to talk a little bit about the difference between a constructive speech and a rebuttal speech. If you see in here, you've got 4 constructive speeches. What that means is during that time, the debaters can bring up new arguments. Now, we talked about that framework of arguments. So they can come up and they can say, elephants are pink, Africa is the best country in the world. Those would all be ideas of like new arguments. Once it gets to the rebuttal, they may not bring up new arguments. So this is also where it's important, where we talked about the clash, that if someone brings up a new argument to clash with the previous argument, then that doesn't count. So the rebuttals are only arguing the clashes that have come up during the constructive speeches. So this walks you through just a little bit more detail about the types of speeches. The constructive, you can see they're used to introduce, build, and respond. They can also respond in constructive speeches. They just can't add new arguments in following speeches. Now, this is very important. Debaters are allowed to bring up, and you will also have a copy of the rules. They are allowed to bring up new analysis, new examples, new illustrations to further support their argument. So if you have somebody that comes up and says, hey, they brought up new analysis and we didn't get a response to it, that's fine. Debaters can bring up new analysis. They cannot bring up new arguments, which is that new statement of a new line of argumentation. This is just a little bit more on cross examinations. Now, this is a note, and you'll see this throughout the slides. It's very important that during the judging and even after, that you don't ask the debaters questions. Questions of clarification are not allowed. You can ask for evidence. If they read evidence, you can ask for evidence. You can also ask for a copy of their case. If there was something that, a lot of them, not in parliamentary, but at both Lincoln Douglas and team policy, will have cases. This is most common in team policy because it is such an evidence-heavy debate for judges to ask for evidence or to ask for the cases. Lincoln Douglas, a lot of the debaters are very advanced, and so some of them may have cases written, some of them may not, but they will be very clear to tell you if you ask for it. Like, I read this part, I did not read this part. Again, re-emphasizing that you can only judge on what was actually read and argued within the round. Okay, rebuttals. This is just what we talked about before. These are to extend existing lines of argumentation. They may include new examples, evidence analysis, uh, and analogies offered to support new lines of argumentation should be disregarded in the rebuttal speeches. Now, on your flow sheets that you have, well, we'll get to that, but you'll be able to see, you won't have to remember which are constructive and which are rebuttals. You'll be able to see that on your flow sheet that we give you, which ones are which. In team policy, these are the types of support, and I'll give us. They can use, these are all things that tends to be very heavy on evidence in team policy, because what we're trying to say is, hey, you're implementing a policy. We need to know that there's evidence behind what you are arguing for this point. Okay, next, evidence. As we talked about before, team policy is a very evidence-heavy debate. So you will hear a lot of evidence in these rounds when you judge them. They will be required to read the evidence and the author. Sometimes they'll do the publication as well, but they need to cite that in the round as they read it. And you can also ask for this after the round too if you're unclear on what they said or would like to see more. Okay, let's go to our next one. Now, this is just what we talked about before. You are welcome to ask for information. Now, do not ask for clarification from the debaters, just ask for the information. And that's very important that at the end of the round, you don't ask for clarifications, don't discuss your decision with anyone else. You can ask questions of rules to other people when you get to judge orientation. But as far as the decision, this is yours and yours alone. We are very passionate about this in STOA. We fully support our judges, is that theirs is the final decision. And you have to be very careful that you're not listening to outside influences within your round so that it remains your decision. Okay, now just a couple little notes on this. Debater communication in team policy, the debaters can talk to each other at the table, on the teams, can discuss it each other on the table. They may pass evidence between the teams, that's acceptable. But once a speaker gets up to talk, they cannot pass communication to the speaker while they're up talking. And so this is different from parliamentary, where they can pass notes to the speaker who is talking. They will be doing all their timing for preparation and for cross-ex, so you don't need to worry about that. Now, flowing. This is the part that's most scary for a lot of people coming in. So I'm just going to give you a couple examples here that make it very simple. We will provide you worksheets that you see right here, and it will tell you at the top what's a constructive and what's a negative. What's a constructive and what's a rebuttal. So you remember we talked about our argument formation of the statement, the explanation, the example, and the impact. On your first flow, that's what you're going to be doing. I'm going to write down my statement, and then I like to write down, okay, just how did they explain it? Just a few words that helps me understand the explanation, things I thought were significant. I'll put an example, and then I abbreviate this like, EX Nazi Germany. So I know they use that as an example, and then it helps me remember as I go through the round. I always write down the impact. The impact is the reason that argument matters, and then it's up to the debater to tell you that why that is important. And that also helps you weigh the argument. So for example, if I have one argument that the impact was, soap will be cheaper, and then I have another, rebuttal to that argument says everybody in the world's going to die from poisoning, the everybody world in the diet would probably have a stronger impact. Now, they still need to explain that and prove that within their argument, but the impact helps me weigh which argument I think is going to win. So that's what I would do on my first one, write this down. And then on the second one, I would write down, okay, did they respond? Now remember, this needs to clash with the argumentation, not bring up a new argument. If they bring up a new argument within this, I've dropped it down here to say, well, okay, this wasn't really a response to this argument, but they brought up this other idea, which could stand as an argument. But then I'm looking for, as we discussed before, have they responded to this argument? This will bring up something that we call dropped arguments. Now, there are two reasons a debater will drop an argument. One, they don't think the argument's important. Two, they just didn't respond to it. Now, at the end of the round, and depending on how hard the other team pushes, if in this case this was a dropped argument and the affirmative team thinks it's an argument that's critical for their case, you should hear about it in the affirmative speeches over and over. They are not responding to this argument. They've dropped this argument. Same with the negative. They are not responding to this argument. They've dropped this argument. We think this argument is critical to the round, right? So then you would be looking for those responses. And then at the end of the round, right, you're making the decision on who won that argument. The other thing this really helps with, it helps you see what debaters think is important in the round. Because what we want to judge on is what did the debaters think was most important in this round, right? What were the arguments that they clashed on? What became the biggest arguments in the round, and who best defended those? And then flowing in this way will help. So you can see as it carries through, they put defense on this as an example. It's just another rebuttal to keep that. One note on constructive versus rebuttals. Constructive can have new lines of argumentation. Rebuttals cannot have new lines of argumentation. They can have additional analysis, evidence, and so on, analogies, but no new lines of argumentation in the rebuttals. So it is up to the debaters to make sure that you understand what they're saying. You do not need to be an expert in debate theory. If they use it, they need to explain it to you. And it's their job to organize and guide you in the round. So your role as the judge, these are the things that we talked about before. To set aside your personal bias. You're judging on the support of each side, not necessarily whether you agree with the side. That's very important. And you decide which team best supports their decision. Yes, and please provide written feedback. It means so much to these students. They are very, very competitive and very, very determined to get better, and they study these forms that you do for them. Things not to do: don't interrupt the debaters. Don't talk during the round. Don't discuss your decision before you submit it. After you submit it, you can discuss it with other judges. We do prefer, in this particular tournament, we are not revealing the results until breaks. Other tournaments, we do what we call decision in room, where you can discuss your decision with the students at the time. In this one, we don't. So we just ask that you don't discuss it outside of the round, unless you're in the judge orientation, or maybe with somebody that you're asking just thoughts or advice from. Do not ask for advice, just a note on that, before you make your decision. It is really important that this decision is yours and yours alone. You can ask for clarification of rules, but we don't want any other outside influences within the round. Okay, this is the form that you will receive, and you can see that there are different parts in here. There are speaking points and as well as a decision. These are two decisions that you will make. You will decide which team wins, and then you will evaluate and award individual presentation. So down here is where you would circle the affirmative or the negative. As you fill out your form, affirmative or negative, and then you're going to evaluate the speakers. What's important is that arguments are more important than presentation. So you may have a team that got lower points, but won in the argumentation. And that is fine. And you would explain that on the backside. Now, where this comes into important is, as a general rule, we think of 3 is your basic high school student, right? What you would expect. from a high school student. Ones and twos tend to be punitive. Like if you have somebody, even though they maybe won the debate, you didn't feel that they were professional, or maybe they were disorganized, and things that you thought that they should have done more at that level for the high school student. Fours and fives are the ones that you see as exceptional speakers, exceptional at organization, and so on. So that gives you an idea of where we see these landing for our league. Okay. Now we do have a double loss. A double loss is disciplinary. You will probably not have a double loss. These are very great debaters, great kids. But that is really something goes wrong in your round. If you come to a double loss before you do that, I would definitely, that means some kind of rule violation. And please ask to speak with either the tournament director, or someone, as you go back into the judge lounge to discuss that did. Okay, so that is casting your vote, and you are voting for the team that best demonstrated the validity of the arguments and best refuted the argument raised by the other team. Now, there is one thing that you may run into. If there is an alleged rule violation, they are responsible for handing you the rules. You can look at it and you can say, hey, I want the debate to continue, or you can take that into account into your decision. That is, again, your prerogative as a judge. So very important, just to wrap this up, you are always judging solely based on the issues discussed in the round, setting aside your own bias and opinions, and be prepared to vote for a position that you don't hold yourself. Remember, we are teaching the students to argue for both sides, and that may not always be something that you do. There's a couple other notes in here that we will leave in case you are in an out round and we have a speed ballot, but that is team policy. Now we will move on to Lincoln Douglas. Okay, Lincoln Douglas. Lincoln Douglas, as we discussed a little bit about at the beginning of our video, is a value debate. It was based on the debate over slavery between Lincoln and Douglas, and was about what should we prioritize in this debate. Like, Douglas was more on the side of the economics, and Lincoln was on the side of freedom. And really what that came down to is what should be prioritized overall as we make our policies. So in this debate, you will hear the students get up and they will tell you what is the value that I think, and I'm going to, we did these slides, so I'm going to go through here a little quickly. So just on these first part. So they're going to tell you, we think that this value is the one that we should go for. That will usually be your first clash within the round. Which value is best supported for this resolution and for their arguments that they build? So almost always, because it's a value debate, you will have a clash on the value. This one right here, resolved, is the resolution that the debaters will be debating at the upcoming tournament. Incrementalism is superior to radicalism as a means to achieve social change. So they will come up, they will have, now this one, they're not gonna, this is the resolution. So their arguments will be based on this resolution. You can expect conversations about what is incrementalism, what is radicalism, an explanation of what they are, examples to support their case, and then impacts about why it matters. And so you will hear, and these are things I would pay particular attention to in Lincoln Douglas. The value, as you're writing down your flow, is going to be very important. And how do they support their value, and why do they think theirs is the best value? Definitions. These can sway around depending on how they defined the terms. So it's also, I do take good notes on definitions. And then their arguments, you're going to hear the same format. I'm going to have a statement, I'm going to have an explanation, I'm going to have an example, and they tend to call their examples applications in Lincoln Douglas, and then an impact. Now, so that's your argumentation as you go by. This is a discussion of values. So the way that they've explained this here, which I really like, is that it's a discussion of values associated with the resolution, and it primarily concerns what ought to be valued instead of what should be implemented. So when someone is defending their case, it all hinges on that value. And you'll hear different types of values: human flourishing, human rights, It's just those are just a couple of examples that you'll hear in a Lincoln Douglas debate about what should be our top value when making decisions underneath these two things of incrementalism and radicalism. And that's why that is such a big clash in the round, is who best supports that value, and then will that value, as that value feeds through the round, which arguments best prove that value. Okay, this is the round structure. I won't go through this in too much detail. This one does have a cross-examination similar to team policy, just one side, one person on each side, so it's shorter, and you only have 2 constructives in this debate, and then 3 rebuttals. Okay, then this just walks you through the constructives. Same thing, they can bring up new arguments in the constructives, and then as you go the cross-examination, very similar. Into rebuttals, again, no new lines of argumentation, but they can continue with new examples, analogies, evidence, and analysis. If they do have a new argument, just like we talked about before, that's not something that you count towards it. Now, in Lincoln Douglas is not as heavy on evidence. This is a more what we tend to think of as a more complex or advanced form of debate. Lincoln Douglas relies most heavily on logic. Does what I'm saying make sense to you? And then their applications or analysis will a lot of times be stories or analogies, as opposed to in team policy, you'll hear direct quotes, direct evidence citations. Lincoln Douglas may have some evidence citations as well, but it's not weighed as heavily in the round as their logic and analysis. These are all, again, things that you may hear throughout the round. Okay, if they do have and cite evidence, they need to have it written in the round. So if they have evidence they've cited in their case, it all needs to be documented correctly, just like it is in team policy. If they have quoted somebody, they need to have, and it's a citation, then same thing as in team policy. Again, you can also ask for these things after the round. You can ask for the case, you can ask for evidence. Now, in Lincoln Douglas, because it is a little bit more advanced, a lot of times that they will do off-case arguments, or as they go throughout the debate. So when you ask for things, it is up to the debater to say, hey, I read this, I did not read this. And remember, you can only take into account what was actually read and argued within the round. This is the same. We go through, don't ask for additional clarification. Same rules follow as you go through the round. Same rules apply. They get, you should disregard any additional comments made after the timer. They will get prep time, and we'll get you all of these. And now these are exactly the same on the flowing. It's just a shorter one, but you're going to flow through just like you did before. Here's your argument. Here's your explanation. And then here are the responses. How did they respond to that argument? We'll go through those. Again, you don't need to be a theory. We talked about all of these, and so I'm going to send you this. This is, again, the same format that we went. These are a little bit different, and then you've got the ability to say, did you support your value argument, and did you give it support? That you can see within here the importance of building up their value argumentation and support. For each debater, 2 decisions, exactly the same, and these will be the same in all of them with how we rate. Okay, so with that, we are going to jump to parliamentary debate. All right, our final type of debate that you may have the opportunity to judge at the upcoming tournament is parliamentary. This is our most complex and advanced form of debate. That doesn't necessarily mean that you won't have new students in it, because we have different levels of students that do compete within this type of debate. But it is a lot of fun. Sometimes you'll get fun resolutions, sometimes you won't. But there are some things that are unique about parliamentary debate. Because it was based on the British Parliament, we call the teams government and opposition. Government, again, affirms the resolution. Opposition refutes the resolution. This is an impromptu debate, which means that they are only given 20 minutes to develop argumentation. And so they have to develop and defend their ideas and position on all kinds of issues. Now, rather than formal evidence, this is where debaters need to utilize information that was within the knowledge of educated and informed citizens. This is very important. If they have something that gets over technical, or over specific within the round that wouldn't be available to the common man knowledge, that should be disregarded in the round. And the debaters will probably tell you that if something gets too specific. They're pretty good about that. But that's just something for you to keep in mind as you're judging this. Now, they do not know what the topic will be beforehand. They're given 20 minutes. They go prep their arguments, and then they come in and debate. Now, in this particular debate, once they get into the room, they can, when they're prepping, they can use different types of resources, and we tell them what, because we change resources available based on the level of debate, and if it's in an out round, they may have limited resources or they may have full resources. And so during that time, they're allowed to use whatever resources those are to build up their argumentation. Now, when they get into the room, they may only bring in handwritten notes and a copy of the parley rules and a printed copy of the resolution. Now, they will give you a copy of the resolution so that you have it there when you're ready to judge. And they may have handwriting on Post-it notes or on their flows. That is all that they're allowed to bring in. So they can't bring in printouts of other, if they have a printer or something, they can't bring out printouts. Like they can bring in printed documentation into Lincoln Douglas and team policy. These are the speaks. Now, there is no cross-X in these, but there is, actually before I get, so there's no cross-X, but there is what we call a point of information or point of orders, and I'll get those in a minute. Just real quick, this is really a fun debate. It allows audible feedback based on the British Houses of Parliament, so you may hear knocking. You're allowed to knock if you agree with something, or if you think something's funny. A lot of times in some of the more formal debates, the judge will knock at the end of each picture, or the audience will knock at the end of each speaker, just to honor that speaker as they go forward. Now, audience feedback should not influence your decision. You may have a group of friends in there and not friends for the other side, so just please keep that in mind as you go through. But it's really meant to be a fun environment. Now, if the feedback gets too loud and you have too many people in the room, you are in charge of the room as the judge, and you can ask people to leave or to be quiet. Okay. Now, same thing. These are different types of support. They will not have evidence or cited evidence in here. Now, they can read evidence, but because of the limited preparation time, you won't be able to ask for that evidence at the end of the round. And so really in parliamentary debate, we consider the speaker the expert. And so they are not required to have evidence. They are bringing you the knowledge that they know. And again, that you are basing your round with assuming that the speaker is the expert on the topic. Okay, so again, this will talk about that. It should be information known within the knowledge of educated and informed citizens. Okay, points of information in order. This is a little bit different than the other two types of debate. A point of information is kind of like a cross-X, but they get to interrupt this or attempt to interrupt the speaker. So you will have somebody, they'll stand, and typically they'll put their hand out and they'll say, hey, I have a point of information, or they'll just stand quietly. And then the speaker will either say, I choose to take your point of information, or I choose not to take your point of information, or please wait. They can handle that how they want. Generally, as you'll have 2 points of information per side. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, depending on the resolution and depending on how many the debater wants to take. Debater can choose how many they take. Judges will have a preference, for how many that you want to take and how you take them. It's really up to you. It is a fun part of parliamentary, and I think just knowing generally 2 are acceptable. So somebody should be taking at least 2 points of information, and I would say I have seen exceptions if it's a very intense resolution and they have a lot to get to and they're only able to take 1. So that gives you an idea. The second one is a point of order. If somebody stands up, they will say point of order. What that means is there has been a rule violation and everybody stops their timer. This is not a big deal. It is part of debate. It happens all the time. The point of order person is going to say, I think this rule was violated. The debaters are to provide you with a copy of the rules or read the rules. At that point, you can make a decision of like, okay, let's continue on with the debate. Or, I need to talk to somebody. You can stop the debate, or you can say, continue on with the debate. I'll take it into account. And that's typically what happens. Most of the time it will be say, hey, this was a new argument. And that's one of the most common ones. And then you make a decision when you're the defense of you hear the accusation and the defense of the debater. You can say, I'll take it into account, and then you can decide if that feeds into your decision on the round. Okay. Okay, so this will talk about here points of information only in constructive speeches. They can't do points of information in any of the rebuttals. And the timer does not stop. And again, it's just a little bit more on, this is just more on what you would do with a point of order. Okay, so same thing, timers. They may, now remember this was different, so they can pass notes to each other when someone is speaking. That is different from team policy. Okay, and then flowing is going to be exactly the same that we talked about. You're going to be looking for responses to your arguments. You don't need to be an expert, they need to educate you, and setting aside our personal bias. Okay, that is it. I just wanted to again say thank you. We'll get to the end of this. Thank you so much for your time watching this video. I hope this was helpful. We will also have somebody there greeting you when you come in to debate with any additional questions. We are excited to see you at our upcoming tournament. God bless.